What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing a tip in the running game on Madden 23, something that I feel like you guys are going to need to know if you're having trouble running the ball on Madden 23, because this is going to be one of the most important things you can do in your running game, but it's kind of counterintuitive, where in past years, you wanted to hit the sprint button to be able to hit the hole and be able to get past the line of scrimmage quickly once you recognize the hole. This year, things operate a little bit differently. I've noticed myself going up against defensive fronts such as this, where we have a 5-on-5 situation, or even a better situation for the offense, where we have a 5-on-3 or a 5-on-4 type of situation, and I've struggled to get rushing yards until I realized that there's something completely different at play here with the running backs that's causing defenders to react differently against your offense. And so what I decided to do was I decided to toy around with it a little bit, and clearly the blocking is not perfect. I mean, we see that on the offensive line here. There's no reason that this center is kicking out the guard and the guard is going up to linebacker, whiffing, whatever. But anyway, we hit this hole pretty easily and, relatively quickly, and we were able to do so without the defensive linemen or linebackers easily coming off their blocks and making this tackle. You can see right here that J.J. Watt, going up against Corbett there on the right side, comes off of his block and almost makes that tackle. And what I've been noticing a lot this year, and I noticed this somewhat last year, was that if you're hitting that hole and you're hitting the sprint button, that defender is coming off of that block 9 times out of 10 and making that tackle without you being able to get the yardage that you should be able to get. I mean, that should be an occasional play by a defender that they're able to get off a block like that, especially when we have inside leverage by the offensive lineman. This should pretty much result in a positive run for, 4 to 5, if not more, yards every single time, like you see here with Christian McCaffrey. Well, the caveat that I want to make clear before we go in and show you guys some more examples is that right here, I'm not hitting the sprint button at all. And in fact, at no point during this play did I ever hit the right trigger or R2 button at all. Basically, what has changed, and, I think it kind of changed last year, but it is certainly a factor this year, is that you don't want to really hit the sprint button at all unless you're in the open field or trying to make a cut, because what ends up happening is it makes defenders play differently. It makes your player play differently as well. It makes you easier to tackle. It makes it harder for you to change directions, which we already knew the changing directions end of things, but it also makes the defenders better at getting off blocks and reacting and tackling you. It makes you easier to tackle, and it makes it much more difficult, like I said, to change directions and make moves. And so those things combine together to make it so that you pretty much don't even want to hit the sprint button this year unless you're in the open space. Like right here, now that I'm past the defender and I know that he can't break off of that block to tackle me, that's when I want to hit the sprint button in order to get upfield and get myself a couple of extra yards before we get into contact. The other thing that I've noticed is that when you do attempt to break a tackle, make a stiff arm, make a move, again, you're going to want to let off of the sprint button. I've seen so many more effective trucking animations within this year and last year, as well as stiff arms and things of that nature, when you're not hitting the sprint button. And especially with skill moves, hitting the sprint button seems to prevent you from being able to do those things, which kind of makes sense. What doesn't make sense is how badly the run plays actually work. If you were to right here, you get the ball, and then you sprint either through that gap in the middle or through the gap on the right side. I mean, you should have running yards there no matter what, and you might get ankle tackled and you might be brought down for a gain of only 3 or 4, but when you're going against a front like this should be guaranteed yardage if you're running the football and your offensive linemen don't completely whiff on their blocks, or you don't see a defender make a really nice block shed attempt and get to your running back. Instead, what I've seen a lot of times is you do this type of thing and you just get tackled immediately because of the way the sprint button is working this year. So here's a really good example of the play being blocked pretty much the exact same way, and this should be yards for you, right? So Christian McCaffrey should be able to cut off of this guard going left or right and get some yardage, but I'm controlling this in no way different than the first play that we saw here. What ends up happening, though, is actually kind of interesting. I get sucked into this block with Christian McCaffrey, even though I'm pushing the stick to the left at this point, and I'm trying to go through that wide open gap that you see there on the left side and cut off of my lineman's block, and instead I'm getting sucked into this defender of J.J. Watt, and that's what's going to happen a lot of the time if you guys use the sprint button during the play, especially around the line of scrimmage. Again, it's counterintuitive. Whenever you see a play like this and you see this blocking right here, you should absolutely be able to hit the sprint button, turbo button, whatever you want to call it, and hit that gap and get yourself 4 or 5 yards before anybody has an attempt to tackle you. But what ends up happening is if you're hitting that, you're going to get sucked into blocks like this, and defenders are going to get sucked over to where you're at. Again, my offensive lineman here has inside leverage. There's no reason that I shouldn't be able to keep the sprint button down and burst past this offensive lineman without the defender really being able to make a play on me. Now, luckily, we do fall forward here for a gain of extra yardage, but this should never result in this type of a carry, especially when I'm putting in input to go to the left, and you can clearly see I'm getting cut to the right and sucked into that defender. So what I also want to show you here is just not hitting the sprint button at all, and the fact that there's no negatives to it whatsoever. When we don't hit the sprint button, we're not causing defenders to block shed and things of that nature, and it just lets us get extra yardage and break tackles without ever having to make a stiff arm or anything like that. Right there, that run with Christian McCaffrey is a perfect example. I never hit the sprint button once here, and this is a pretty tough box to go against. We do get a good job blocking, but I'm able to just zoom past all of my blocks without anybody really making a successful tackle attempt on me, and I'm able to get 10-15 yards downfield without doing a whole lot, without having to put any input into the play. I'm just going through my hole. And so this year, with the run game, I'm essentially just letting you guys know that it's not about hitting a hole, it's literally about finding the hole and walking through it. If you can just successfully find your hole early and just walk your running back through it, you're gonna have a really good time. This is CMC right here, not a big running back. He's able to break a few tackles. I know he has good break tackle ratings and things like that, but this is the type of thing that you will never see if you're sprinting. If I see this hole right now, my intuition is that I should absolutely sprint through this hole. That's how it should be. That's how the game should operate. It would make no sense for them to do it otherwise, but again, Madden doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and the way they code these things doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like I said before, we have guys with inside leverage here. My tight end has inside leverage on this outside backer or D end, whatever he is. My tackle over here has inside leverage on this other backer or D end that's out there, and then my guard here, I believe this is my guard, has inside leverage on this defensive lineman. I should absolutely be able to sprint through this hole and burst away for extra yardage, but trust me, if you guys hit that sprint button like I showed you before, you're going to get sucked into these players. Instead, just don't even bother hitting the sprint button, and you're going to be able to break tackles like this. This is going to allow you to have much more success within the run game that I didn't know was possible in this game until I just started not sprinting through gaps. Basic intuition, yeah, you should see your hole and burst through it, but no, that's literally not the case. I actually find a lot of times that it's helpful to just play pinball with your running back, and they'll eventually find a gap. If you're holding down R2, you're going to be much easier to tackle, but if you're not hitting R2, you can pinball through the line for extra yardage, and I think that this has been the difference that a lot of users users have potentially been doing this over the past year or two within Madden, and I didn't know this information. I mean, nobody ever told me this information, that you could just literally hold the stick forward and that would get you yards running the football. It's super counterintuitive, like I said, and I don't want to drag this video out too long or anything like that, but I wanted to give you guys more examples. I'm literally not hitting the sprint button, and I'm able to get through these gaps, something that doesn't happen if you do hit the sprint button. So let's say sprint button right here, and again, we just get sucked into a tackle and tackled backwards. So nonetheless, I hope that this video was useful to you in some way, and if it was, leave a like on the video. I know that this is something that probably a lot of people in the community already know, but I clearly didn't know it, and it's a gameplay aspect of things that when I researched it online was not advertised anywhere. I was not seeing much from, you know, articles, YouTube videos, anything telling me that we've really completely modified the way that you're supposed to run the football, and thanks to Cash and Checks 5923, I don't know if his YouTube channel is still active or not, but he's a buddy of mine that kind of pointed it out, like, hey, just don't sprint this year. Don't use the sprint button. Just pinball through the line, and that's going to get you rushing yards. And like I said, shout out to him for giving me this information and giving me this tip, because I was hurting myself trying to sprint through gaps that I was essentially costing myself yardage with, because, yeah, you don't want to sprint through. It'll cause animations that are going to be detrimental to your running game. You're going to have a much better time if you just don't sprint at all and use it very sparingly. So nonetheless, leave that feedback down below. Leave a like on the video, comment, and subscribe. As always, I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a good one.